I am looking at the operational damage assessment from the night of April doctrine, and what I am seeing is not a tactical footnote. This is a strategic inflection point that the mainstream Western press has, once again, buried beneath headlines about Middle East ceasefire negotiations and trade tariff cycles. While every major network was cycling through footage from the Gulf, Ukraine's security service, the SBU, executed one of the most methodical, multi-domain degradation strikes against Russian military infrastructure in Crimea since this war began, and the geopolitical reverberations of what happened in Sevastopol that night will be felt from London's maritime insurance markets to Beijing's naval war colleges. Here's what the headlines are not telling you. This was not a single lucky drone hit. Ukrainian forces launched at least 71 drones in a coordinated overnight campaign, targeting the Russian Black Sea Fleet's naval base in Sevastopol and the Belbek military airfield simultaneously. That is a saturation attack, designed not just to overwhelm point defenses, but to prosecute multiple high-value target categories in a single operational window: fleet assets, aviation infrastructure, radar systems, intelligence command nodes, all struck in the same night. That is the signature of a mature, intelligence-driven strike doctrine operating in real time. What the anchors also missed: most of Russia's Black Sea Fleet had already been forced to relocate from occupied Crimea to the Russian port of Novorossiysk, following repeated Ukrainian strikes that exposed the vulnerability of naval assets in Sevastopol and other Crimean bases, and yet Ukraine found the ships that remained and struck them anyway. The fleet that Russia couldn't protect in Sevastopol is now being hunted in Novorossiysk as well. There is nowhere left to run. I have spent the last several hours cross-referencing SBU operational statements, OSINT satellite analysis from Cyberbaroshno and Exilanova, and historical engagement records from the Black Sea Theater going back to October 2022. And the picture that emerges is not a story about a single strike. It is the story of a naval force in terminal decline, and a set of macro consequences that will hit your fuel bills, your shipping insurance rates, and the credibility of Russian power projection for the next decade. Let me break it down. To understand why the Black Sea Fleet situation is structurally irreversible, you must first understand the geography, because the geography itself is a weapon, and it is now pointed at Russia. The Black Sea is, by every strategic measurement, a landlocked operational theater. It has only two maritime exit points: the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles Straits, both sovereign Turkish territory governed by the 1936 Montreux Convention. Under that convention, Turkey closed the straits to warships of belligerent nations in February 2022, meaning Russia cannot meaningfully reinforce its Black Sea Fleet from its northern fleet or the Mediterranean. What assets Russia had in theater at the start of this war are functionally all it will ever have. There is no resupply pipeline for major surface combatants. The theater is, in operational terms, a sealed box. Now layer the terrain. Sevastopol sits on the southwestern coast of Crimea, a peninsula jutting into the Black Sea that is connected to the Ukrainian mainland only via the narrow Perekop Isthmus in the north and the Kerch Strait Bridge in the east. Both access corridors have been systematically degraded throughout this conflict. The Kerch Bridge, the logistical spine of Russian Crimea, has suffered multiple Ukrainian strike packages. The peninsula is simultaneously Russia's most strategically valuable occupied territory and its most logistically vulnerable one. Supplying and defending a landlocked peninsula with no reinforcement corridor and an enemy actively hunting the supply chain is a doctrinal nightmare for any conventional military planner. Traditional Western naval doctrine, carrier battle group operations, blue water power projection, anti-access, area denial enforcement operates on the assumption of depth, strategic depth in ocean maneuver, depth in logistics chains, depth in defensive layers. The Black Sea provides none of that. The entire theater is approximately 1,175 kilometers at its widest point. Modern Ukrainian drone systems, with operational ranges of several hundred kilometers, effectively place every Russian port on that coastline within strike range. Novorossiysk, once treated as a safe rear area harbor after Sevastopol became untenable, is now under regular saturation attack. The back-to-back strikes in Crimea and Novorossiysk have demonstrated Ukraine's sustained ability to threaten Russian naval forces across the entire Black Sea region, with Ukrainian officials noting that Russia appears to have no safe harbor remaining for its battered fleet. That statement should be parsed with clinical precision. No safe harbor is not rhetoric. It is an operational assessment. When a naval force cannot maintain its ships in port without suffering kinetic degradation, it ceases to function as a fleet in any meaningful projection-capable sense. It becomes a collection of targets. The physics of the Black Sea sealed Russia's strategic options. The degradation of Crimean logistics amplified Ukrainian strike reach. And the cumulative attrition of platform after platform has crossed the threshold from tactical damage into structural institutional collapse. What Western analysts classified 3 years ago as a formidable regional fleet no longer constitutes a credible anti-access or power projection force. The geography guaranteed the outcome. Ukraine's execution delivered it ahead of schedule. The April 25-26 operation demands a platform-by-platform, system-by-system dissection because each target category was struck for a specific operational reason. This was not random. Every aim point corresponds to a deliberate capability degradation objective. The SBU's Special Operations Center Alpha struck the following target set simultaneously: the large landing ships Yamal and Filchenkov, the reconnaissance ship Ivan Kurs, the Lukamka Black Sea Fleet Training Center, the Radio Technical Intelligence Headquarters of Air Defense Forces, the MR-10M1 MIS M1 Coastal Radar Station, a MiG-31 interceptor aircraft at Belbek Airfield, and the Technical and Maintenance Section of Belbek Airfield. Begin with the landing ships. The Yamal is a Rapucha-class Project 775 vessel, a large amphibious warfare platform capable of transporting tanks, armored vehicles, and assault infantry for shore-to-shore operations. The Filchenkov is a Tapir-class Project 1171, an older but still operationally capable large landing ship with similar mission profiles. Critically, this was not the first time these vessels were struck. A similar raid on April 18th had targeted the landing ships Yamal and Azov, illustrating a consistent campaign to neutralize the Black Sea Fleet's amphibious operational capacity. Ukraine is not hitting these ships once and moving on. It is returning to confirm kills and to re-engage vessels that Russian damage control parties attempt to recover. That is a kill chain methodology, not opportunistic targeting. The significance of eliminating large landing ship capacity cannot be overstated in the context of Russia's southern strategic ambitions. Without functional amphibious lift, Russia cannot execute a contested shore-to-shore assault against Odessa or any other coastal Ukrainian city. Without landing ships, Russia loses the ability to threaten Odessa, fundamentally destroying its plans for the Mykolaiv region. Those amphibious platforms were the kinetic option on Russia's shelf for a potential coastal encirclement of Ukraine's last major Black Sea port. That option is now being methodically removed hull by hull. Now examine the Ivan Kurs. This is a Yuri Ivanov-class intelligence-gathering ship, one of the most sophisticated signals, intelligence, and electronic warfare collection platforms in the Russian Navy's inventory. Its mission in theater was to map Ukrainian electromagnetic profiles, radar emissions, communications nodes, electronic signatures of drone launch sites, naval command frequencies. Killing or disabling this vessel is not a trophy strike. It is a deliberate electromagnetic blinding operation. Every time the Ivan Kurs is taken offline, Russia loses real-time SIGINT coverage of the Western Black Sea. The targeting decisions that flow from that intelligence vacuum, which ships move, where, when, under what air defense umbrella, become tactically degraded. Ukraine is not just destroying hardware, it is attacking Russia's ability to see. The destruction of the MR-10M1 MIS M1 coastal radar station compounds that blinding effect. The MIS M1 is a Soviet-era surface search and navigation radar system with coastal surveillance functions. It feeds targeting data to both naval and air defense systems. Removing it creates a gap in the radar picture over the approaches to Sevastopol, the precise approach corridor that Ukrainian drones exploited to execute this very strike. At Belbek Airfield, the strike on the MiG-31 interceptor is clinically significant. The SBU confirmed that the strike on Belbek damaged a MiG-31 and various technical facilities, targeting the airfield's operational and maintenance infrastructure to degrade Russian air capabilities. The MiG-31, in its modernized Foxhound B and Foxhound K variants, serves as the primary high-altitude, high-speed interceptor and, critically, as the launch platform for the Kinjal hypersonic missile. Degrading Belbek's MiG-31 capacity directly reduces Russia's hypersonic strike options against Ukrainian rear area targets. This is not a secondary effect. It is a primary objective. Telegram channel Crimean Wind reported that drones were flying over Sevastopol in all directions, with mobile air defense groups firing haphazardly. That operational picture, chaotic, reactive, volume-overwhelmed Russian air defense, is the signature of a successful saturation attack protocol. Ukraine has learned, through 2 years of iterative engagement, exactly how many airframes at what ingress vectors are required to saturate Russian SHORAD and medium-range air defense systems over Sevastopol. The swarm volume was calibrated, the flight corridors were deconflicted, the sequencing was deliberate: blind the radar first, disable the interceptor, then prosecute the ship targets with subsequent waves. The strike on April 6, 2026 on Admiral Makarov in Novorossiysk damaged its superstructure and Kaliber launch systems, one of the fleet's most capable surface combatants, while the March 2, 2026 strike involving more than 200 drones sank the minesweeper Valentin Pikul and seriously damaged multiple anti-submarine ships. When you aggregate all of these engagements, the cumulative effect is a fleet that has lost its flagship to a Neptune anti-ship missile, most of its amphibious lift to drone swarms, its primary intelligence collection vessel to recurring strikes, and its forward interceptor coverage at its last functioning Crimean airbase. By every metric of naval combat power, anti-surface, anti-submarine, amphibious, strike, and fleet defense, the Black Sea Fleet's Crimean-based capability is a hollow shell. The dismantling of Russia's Black Sea Fleet is not merely a theater-level military development. It is an event with traceable, quantifiable consequences for global energy markets, maritime insurance pricing, grain corridor stability, and the institutional credibility of Russian conventional deterrence as a geopolitical instrument. Begin with the grain corridor. Odessa is Ukraine's primary commercial port and the gateway for Ukrainian agricultural exports, wheat, corn, and sunflower oil that collectively feed import-dependent markets across North Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Russian naval power in the Black Sea was, for the first 2 years of this war, a mechanism for threatening, interdicting, or coercing access to that corridor. Every Russian surface combatant that remains capable of launching caliber cruise missiles or threatening civilian shipping degrades the economic calculus for commercial operators transiting the Western Black Sea. As Russia's ability to credibly threaten that corridor decays, the risk premium on Black Sea grain routes should compress. That should, in theory, reduce commodity price volatility for wheat importing nations, Egypt, Tunisia, Lebanon, Indonesia, that have been absorbing the inflationary overpressure of this conflict since 2022. However, the counter-dynamic is already operating. This maritime campaign has pushed the Black Sea Fleet out of the waters near Crimea and forced it to relocate from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, where the fleet largely remains in port, only venturing out for small patrols and Kaliber missile strikes against targets deep in Ukraine. A fleet bottled up in its own ports is not a credible coercive instrument, but it also becomes increasingly irrelevant as a stabilizing presence. In the power vacuum created by Russia's naval retreat, unattributed attacks on commercial shipping, incidents that neither side formally claims, have increased. The risk remains, it simply wears different clothes. The maritime insurance market has already priced in a structurally elevated Black Sea risk tier. Lloyd's of London and the Joint Cargo Underwriting Associations have maintained war risk surcharges on Black Sea routes since March 2022. Those surcharges translate directly into higher freight rates. Higher freight rates translate into higher landed costs for bulk commodity importers, and higher commodity import costs translate into persistent food-linked inflation in precisely the emerging market economies least equipped to absorb them. The tactical engagement over Sevastopol on April 25th will not resolve in a single actuarial reassessment, but every confirmed Russian naval attrition event incrementally shifts the underwriting risk calculus. Now examine the harder macro consequence, what Russia's naval collapse means for the doctrine of conventional deterrence itself. The Black Sea Fleet was not simply a collection of warships, it was a tangible expression of Russian conventional military power in a region where Moscow claimed permanent unchallengeable dominance. Since 2014, Russia's annexation of Crimea was undergirded by the premise that its military presence there was both physically and strategically irremovable. The Black Sea Fleet was the steel credibility behind that claim. Ukrainian forces have demonstrated that Crimea is no safe harbor for the occupiers. The global strategic consequence of that demonstration is being absorbed by defense ministries from Taipei to Warsaw. If a mid-tier military power operating without a surface navy of its own can systematically destroy a major regional fleet using asymmetric, uncrewed systems costing a fraction of the platforms they destroy, then the capital-intensive, platform-centric naval doctrine that has defined Western and Russian power projections since World War II is fundamentally under audit. Future naval procurement decisions in Washington, London, Paris, and Beijing are now being stress-tested against the operational reality established in the Black Sea. What does a $3 billion destroyer mean when a sub-$500,000 drone swarm can prosecute it in a confined, literal theater? That question does not have a clean answer, but it has a Black Sea price tag. Russia's export revenues, already under pressure from sanctions attrition and the parallel energy market disruption created by the ongoing Iran conflict, cannot be decoupled from its Black Sea logistics. Ukrainian drones struck the Sheskari's oil terminal, one of southern Russia's largest crude export facilities, damaging 6 of 7 oil loading arms and sparking a large fire. When naval degradation enables strike access to energy export infrastructure, the attrition compounds. Fewer warships mean less defended ports, mean more exposed terminals, mean disrupted crude flows and falling export revenues. The tactical and the macroeconomic are not parallel tracks, they are the same track. I want to leave you with the dilemma that no one in Washington or Brussels is speaking plainly about because it does not have a politically comfortable resolution. The degradation of Russia's Black Sea Fleet has been operationally decisive, but operational success and strategic resolution are not the same thing. Here is the problem as I see it. Sitting with these damage assessments and these force disposition maps. Path 1. The Western alliance maintains pressure, continues supplying Ukraine with the long-range drone systems and targeting intelligence that enable these strikes, and pushes toward a negotiated settlement from a position of demonstrated Ukrainian maritime dominance. The risk: a cornered Kremlin, one whose conventional deterrent has been visibly humiliated in a theater it called its sovereign sphere, reaches for asymmetric escalation options that conventional military logic would otherwise exclude. A damaged, humiliated Russia is not a de-escalating Russia. History does not support that assumption. Path 2. The West allows the ongoing ceasefire negotiations, currently clouded by the Iran war's distraction and Hungary's blocking of EU aid packages, to produce a frozen conflict arrangement that leaves Crimea in legal limbo. Ukraine retains its demonstrated strike capability. Russia retains the peninsula, and the Black Sea remains a permanently contested, economically volatile, insurance rate inflating zone of indefinite instability. Neither path delivers clean resolution. Both carry costs that will ultimately be expressed in energy prices, shipping rates, and the slow erosion of rules-based maritime order. I want your tactical assessment in the comments. Escalate to force a settlement or negotiate before the cornered bear overreacts. If this briefing added value to your strategic picture, subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow's briefing goes deeper into what happens when Novorossiysk becomes untenable too.